untuk melaksanakan perintah kawalan pergerakan.
Going live in 3, 2, 1.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. You are tuning in at IIUM TV live with Podcast Insights, 40 minutes of podcast knowledge. I'm Alia Daniel, your host for today's episode, and we are back with the third episode for this season. Now, before we proceed, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and follow IIUM TV on all of our social media accounts: YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and our latest account on LinkedIn. Now, let's just talk about what recently happened, right? Which will sort of connect to our topic for today. And so, let me just talk about what happened to me recently. It wasn't something that happened, it was just an event that happened. So, I recently went to the bookstore and, I went to the political science section. And it was really interesting because there were a lot of books that really captivated my attention. And so, I was really keen to know more on Muslim politics, right? And here we are for this episode talking about Muslim politics, and specifically Muslim politics and the transnational ideology of political Islam. Now, it's a pretty heavy topic, but we have a very special guest to talk about it with us here today. So let us introduce our guest for tonight's episode, Brother Huzayl Mohd. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. Thank you for taking time for inviting.
Thank you. So basically, Brother Huzayl is a final year political science student and also the president of Harmoni. And so he is back here with us again for the second time on Political Insights. So the last episode of the last season, you were our guest, discussing on the flight and everything that happened. So how do you feel about being back here with us again today?
It's great to see some familiar faces. Last time we have Aisha there, and also tonight we are in the studio, and it is good to our political department have the kind of discussion in IUM TV. It's good to be back.
And it feels great to have you back again.
Thank you so much.
So maybe you should, be a common guest for our show after this. So, shall we get right into the discussion?
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about Muslim politics, political Islamism, and all of that. So our first question for you today is, Muslim politics and political Islam seems to be two terms that, if people don't know much about it, they would use it interchangeably. So would you just, do you mind explaining to the viewers out there what are the distinctions between these two ideologies or concepts?
Okay, thank you so much, Sister Alia. Muslim politics and political Islam is often been misunderstood and to the extent of misjudged between two of them. And it's basically Muslim politics is as simple as it's not kind of an ideology, I would say. It's just the scope of discussion in discussing around politics and also a Muslim community. It could be a discussion between democratization in the Islamic countries, for example, or how Muslim in certain region or certain countries accepting or assessing their leadership. Are they okay with authoritarian, or are they okay with democracy, and so on and so forth. So it's all about Muslim and politics, as simple as that. On the other hand, the political Islam have a different context of discussion, and it is a discourse or a discussion regards to the Islamism or Islamic movement, I would say. So political Islam is a new kind of discourse occurs by the Western. I think it started around after 9/11 took place, and then West very interested to study about Islamism, and Taliban, and so on and so far. So there you go. We have a political Islam. So there's the distinction, and there are also various definition of political Islam. And if I may quote one of the definition from Muhammad Ayub, he wrote it in the manifestos of political Islam books. He said that political Islam or Islamism is the usage of Islam as an instrument in achieving their political vision of Muslim. So the political Islam is much more an ideology, I would say, compared to Muslim politics, the area of discussion, which is as simple as between Muslim, Islamic countries, and also how the politics in that.
So what I can understand basically from your answer is that political Islam really uses Islam as the symbol and the justification as for their acts.
Yeah.
All right. So my next question for you is that, you know, some people, they might say that Islamism carries a negative connotation. So what is your take on this?
It's a common narrative, and I do heard it a lot, that Islamism always being subjected to or referred to one only particular groups of Islamists. For example, Taliban. For example, what we have the extremist or radicalist Islamists. But Bassam TB wrote it in Islamism and Islam. There are actually various of vision or various of version of Islamists in the world, starting from Jamaluddin Al-Afghani, the pan-Islamist thinker, if you heard about it.
Yes.
Yeah, it's some sort of the pioneer of Islamism or Islamists. He brings the idea of during that time, 18th century, the Islamic society is in the deep mess. We are very backward. So he believed that we need to reform, and he proposed the idea of pan-Islamism. We have to unite, and we have to maintain our caliphate system during that time. So they still have a Uthmaniyah caliphate, 18th century. But post the fall of Caliphate Uthmaniyah 1924, the idea of Islamism had been extended by Rashid Ridha, Muhammad Abduh, Hassan al-Banna, and so on and so forth. And the idea of Islamism has, up until now, has various of version and types, not just the radical like Taliban or ISIS. There are Islamists in Malaysia, I would say, that are much more progressive. We have Islamists in Thailand, in Indonesia as well, that much more progressive. In Turkey, AK Party, they consider themselves as a Muslim Democrats. It's some sort of another version of Islamism. So not all Islamists is radical in some sense, but there are various and different type of Islamists brings different approach in propagating the agenda, I would say.
Right. So you were talking about how it really does not, it really is not narrowed down to a certain type of system that they have, or like the system. They really don't narrow it down to a certain type of concept, right?
Yeah.
You would say. So what do you think about Muslims today, like Muslim countries today? Do you think that they are truly upholding the Islamic values and practices?
Okay, that's actually an interesting question, because we have to understand that not all Muslim is Islamist, and not all Islamic countries believe in Islamism. For example, Indonesia, they are considered as Islamic states in the definition of their population of Islamic or Muslim is very large in Indonesia, and in Malaysia as well. We consider as an Islamic state in the definition of we have Islamic terms in our constitution. So first we have to clear that not all Muslim is Islamist, and the question regards to are Muslims nowadays uphold the values of Islam, it is very interesting because there's a book wrote by our Deputy Rector, Dr. Zul, in the title of Islam di Timur, Muslim di Barat, or in English, Muslim in the Timur and Islam in the West, which shows that these Islamic countries don't really practice Islam compared to Muslim in the Western country that practice Islam more than Middle East and so on and so forth. So that's the that's the interesting example lah, I would say. So do Islam really practicing their value in Islamic countries? They don't really do that, but in the Western countries, Muslim there practice more Islam compared to the Middle East or Southeast Asia.
It's really interesting, Brother Huzayl, when you said that, you know, not all Muslim countries really uphold these values, and actually, you know, Western countries or non-Muslim countries, they actually really uphold these values more and really practice Islamic practice more in their lives, and we can really see how that is sort of a clash of how it actually is supposed to be. So that is a very interesting take. So before we proceed with our discussion, we'll be right back after this short commercial break, so don't go anywhere just yet. This has been Podcast Insights, 40 minutes of podcast knowledge. Welcome back to Politica Insights, 40 minutes of political knowledge. So previously we have discussed on the introduction of Muslim politics and political Islam. So let us dive deeper into our discussion today with Brother Huzayl on the transnational flow of political Islam specifically. Now, so from a perspective of a political science student, how would you say that this ideology acts as a catalyst, you know, to the major events that has happened all over the world over the years?
All right. From my personal point of view of a student, so if there are lecturer watching, I'm sorry for any mistakes. Islamism do actually contributed a lot in our modern society, I would say. So, for example, the Islamists itself, in its ideology, they believe that the current world needed some sort of new invented or new approach in having affairs in our world. Like Islamists do believe that the Western hegemony, the socialistic ideology, is some sort of threat to a human being. So they have this idea of having a state or the world of rahmah. So
Wow.
by having that vision, so Islamists do a lot of political activities, and one of them, I would say, starting from pre World War II, around 1920 until 1960, I would say, there are major events in the world that Islam had contributed in it. For example, like we discussed before, after the falling of Khalifah Uthman, Uthmani Caliphate, there are only one hegemony in the world that controls everything. So we have a capitalistic system, we have a liberal democracy order, and this kind of world order came from Western, I would say. It's not fit for all, and it's not good for all the human being in the world lah. Okay, so they propose the idea of, okay, we need to have a different kind of world, and their knowledge production contributed a lot in what happened in our world today. So there are articles wrote by Muhammad Ayub on the Islamists as a hegemonic pretender for the US hegemony, in the sense that in future there might be another world order that Islamists believe that the world order is more justice, is more livable for the human being. We don't have poverty, we don't have some sort of food security issue, global warming, and so on and so forth. That's one of the aspects. Another aspect is the knowledge production of our knowledge in general. So post 9/11, even though it is not a good scenario, not a good event, but by having that, our academic world had a lot of things to research on, and that's developed our world in academics regards to Islamism or political Islam, I would say. Yeah, in my opinion.
That was a lot to take in, but it was very interesting because it is definitely true what you said about the orders and how they have this perspective that, you know, there is a better order, you could say, to really live in a world where there is no poverty and all these social issues. So hopefully we'll get to a phase in this world where, you know, this place will reach that sort of point of livability. All right, so you have also mentioned the 9/11 tragedy, I would say, or incident. Now, let's talk about more on the Arab Spring issue, right?
Arab Spring.
So, as you know, among the major factors was the stagnant economic condition, right? So, provided with the current political condition of the Arab countries, right, what you can see as for now, do you think that it's possible for this issue, as I said, Arab Spring, to reoccur?
Interesting. First of all, yeah, that's one of the interesting point of view to see that Arab Spring occur because of the economic issue. But another perspective says that Arab Spring occurs because of the nature of human being. There are theories proposed by Ibn Khaldun, the cyclical theory, where our history of human being, tamadun in English, the civilization has their cyclical nature. They will start from the bottom, and they will have their glamorous highest achieved civilization, and it will end. And how they end and how they start back is by having a revolution. So that's one of the perspective that says Arab Spring occurs by nature, not just because of economic per se. So by having that theory, I believe that Arab Spring or any kind of similar incident could occur somewhere else, not just in Middle East, North African region, but also in other region that also can have same kind of incident or events where they revolt against governments when the politics is injustice anymore. We don't have anything to eat. Like in Malaysia, we have food security issue. So might be we have another, not Arab Spring, but Southeast Asia Spring. I don't know. Like what happened in
That is worrying.
yeah, it's worrying. Like what happened in Thailand, they revolt against their government and so on and so forth. So following that the cyclical theory, I believe it might be happen somewhere some else, and that's the nature of human being. We always have the start of civilization, the peak of civilization, and the fall of civilization, I would say, in my opinion. Yeah.
Right. So that was very interesting because, as you can see, these are not just happening in Middle Eastern countries. These are also happening. This has also been happening in other countries and even big countries, such as the Western countries.
That's
right.
French Revolution before. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay, maybe we can talk more about that later. So we'll dive in more, because you have mentioned on the Arab Spring and also on the Palestine-Israel conflict. So let's talk about post-Islamism.
Post-Islamism.
Right? So do you think, personally, that there has been a prominent shift of political Islam in the past 10 to 15 years?
All right. So political Islam definitely, or I would say obviously, have a major change in previous 10 years, especially after or post the Arab Spring. So post Arab Spring, the I would say the notion or the way Islamists portray themselves is not as radical as before, or not as Islamic as before. So Islamists, they kind of have this image that they want to bring Islam as a highest law of the states. But post Arab Spring, most of Islamists or some group of Islamists already toned down their vision or toned down their approach, and they move to more pragmatic and more democratic, I would say, in approaching their Islamic idea, their vision. So, for example, in Tunisia, Rashid Ghannouchi, one of my favorite thinker and also politician, he's one of the founder of Islamists that influenced by Ikhwan in Tunisia. But throughout the years, after post Arab Spring, the movement changed into a party that is some sort of Islamic Democrat, or he themselves claim himself not Islamist anymore, but I'm a Muslim Democrat, to show that we are okay with democracy, and we are fighting social justice. We are fighting what liberals are fighting for, to solve the hunger issue and so on and so forth. So that's how political Islam or Islamists had changed throughout this previous 10 years, I would say. And interestingly, the term post-Islamism is not well acceptable in the context of
Muslim politics.
Muslim politics and Islamic scholars.
Really?
Some of them prefer to refer this kind of changes as the second generation of political Islam, rather than to follow the post-Islamism post-Islamism narrative. So the thinkers that first occur or first proposed this idea is Olivier Roy in the books of The Failure of Political Islam. So Asif Bayat extend his idea in the terms of post-Islamism. But another thinkers believe that this is still Islamist, they are still Islamism. Hence, it's just a second generation of Islamists, not post-Islamist. Because if you are post-Islamist, you don't bring the idea of Islam anymore. You move on.
I see.
Yeah. So in the intellectual discussion or academic, they are still have some sort of
Contemplation and dilemma between the two.
Yes.
All
Whether
right.
to accept or to reject the terms.
That was very interesting. We'll continue with our discussion on post-Islamism after this short commercial break, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. This has been Political Insights, 40 minutes of political knowledge.
Ya, bisa.
Welcome back to Political Insights. So previously we have discussed on post-Islamism. We have actually just dived into post-Islamism, but now we are going to talk more about it in a more relatable context and in a more grounded context where we could all relate to, because the questions are going to be more on how it is here in Malaysia. All right. So, Brother Huzayl, my question for you is, how do you see the progress of Islamic movements in Malaysia right now?
Interesting. By saying Islamic movement, are we referring to political parties as well? Or just the Islamic movement in general?
Maybe you could say in general.
In general?
Yeah.
Okay. Islamic movement in Malaysia, in general, personally, I see the trends of declining in terms of its participation in Malaysian political area, because Islamic movement or political Islamists, I would say, have to be very direct in the political arena, and we can see that there are only two Islamist parties surviving now, maybe three. Surviving now. One is Parti Amanah Negara and Parti Islam Malaysia PAS, Parti Berjasa. So, and they don't really have huge voices in parliament. We can count which seat belongs to Amanah and which seat belong to PAS, right? They're not that much. And in terms of the civil society movement, we do have also Islamist or Ikhwan influence in the Malaysian context. For example, ABIM, Angkatan Belia Islam Malaysia, Ikram, for example, Pertubuhan Ikram Malaysia. They are Ikhwan influence. They bring the same idea, and the progress that they shows in Malaysia is not that great. Our leading discourse of poverty, of having a justice country is still led by some sort of I would say more liberal or non-Islamic movement. So they have to step up the game on how or which approach they want to follow in propagating their idea, I would say. But some of the movement had already move on or use some progressive approach, like Parti Amanah Negara. One of the politician, our former Minister of Health, Dr. Zul, they once claimed himself as a Muslim Democrat. That's a good thing to start with when you consider democracy as one of your approach in propagating Islam. So that's basically the context of political Islam in Malaysia, right? Yeah.
So you mentioned about, you mentioned on these parties and civil societies that, really connects to political Islam. But so I would like to ask you on how it really applies to, how the context really applies to Malaysian students. So what is your perspective on the current involvement of Malaysian students in Islamic movements, and what are like the barriers and the stigmatization on when it comes to recruitment?
Interesting. I think I just expose it here. Islamists, they have their ways of recruiting new members, or say new followers. So they have some sort of usrah session, which is they have a religious discussion where they discuss on religion, and the image is worse after we have ISIS and we have issues with students joining ISIS. So that image brings or affect another Islamist movement that is more lenient lah. So the trend is students or youth in general joining Islamic movement is declining, I would say, and it's much more less than if we compare to 1998, the time where the Islamism flourished in our country. Why is that happen? I would say because of the Islamists itself. They hesitant to follow or to step up their game in following the main issue to championing, especially in Malaysia. So they keep talk about tarbiyah, they keep talk about your aurah and so on and so forth, but they don't really talk about hunger, poverty, justice. While in Islam, this is all a part of things in Islam that we have to take care of first. Like in Maqasid Syariah, we have to take care of our religion, to take care of our mind, to take care of our living. So Islam is not just about fiqh and hukum, but this is how Islamists keep on doing in propagating their idea. So the failure to adapt with the fast movement of modern society make them less relevant to the youth nowadays. There's one theory of youth mentioned. Youth nowadays don't really like to attach to any parties or society. They are very gangship. So that's why we have a rebel gang, shuffle gang, punk, and so on and so forth. Because the nature of youth is to have a gangship, and they want a dynamic movement. They don't want to being tied to follow anything. So the failure to adapt, the failure to understand the psyche of youth leads to now we have very little numbers of youth joining Islamic movement or Islamic parties, I would say. So yeah, Islamists has to step up their game.
Would you also say that because of these social issues, it has also contributed to how the youth understands or looks at these issues, or perceives Islamic movements? Would you say that they act also as factors leading to their perception towards Islamic movements?
Yeah, I would say. They might be one of the factors.
Alright, I see.
Social issue.
So we're also still talking about students. How do you believe students can be more involved intellectually when it comes to Islam in the international world, political Islam, Muslim politics and Islamism and such? So how do you believe students can be more active on that?
Okay, that is a very interesting question because we in IUM itself, we do have quite a less subject regards to political Islam. Mungkin
That's true.
department boleh ni. So the first thing first, how to get engaged in the discussion is, of course, you have to read more. Even if you don't like reading, you can start to watch intellectual or discourse in YouTube. There are various of discourse that is free in YouTube that you can watch. For example, a forum conducted by IRF, Islamic Renaissance Funds, on a very interesting topic. Can a liberalist be an Islamist? And they discuss it in a very layman context and terms. You can understand it very clearly. So first, you can start with, to engage in the discussion or read books. And secondly, you have to feel the urgency in some sort of get involved in the discussion, because if we neglect this area of discussion, it's going to be monopolized or led by the Western intellectuals, which we know they have their biasness. So if we don't take up this area, then they have no future Islamists or Islamic thinkers to actually do discuss about it. Yeah, I think that's pretty much the two things the youth or students can do.
That was very interesting because that was actually our final question for you, unfortunately. But I can understand that even though a lot of students don't actually know about these Islamic movements or Muslim politics, basically, it's really important. Even though we don't directly discuss on these social issues, which students tend to focus more when it comes to activism, it really affects the Muslim society and our ummah, basically.
Yeah.
Because when we really develop our minds and really expand our minds by, exposing ourselves to these things, like you have mentioned, these discourses, and by reading more, we'll be able to learn more and really change our perceptions towards these biasness that we often are influenced by the Western ideologies even. So I've definitely gained a lot, and it was really interesting. It was a very heavy topic for me, I must say, but I have gained a lot. And so yeah, going back to what I said earlier, we really need to read more and learn more on this because it would definitely benefit us, just not as students, but also as a growing human being. So thank you so much, Brother Huzayl, for our discussion today on Muslim politics. You're welcome. It was lovely getting to really talk about this with someone who is really knowledgeable on this issue. And maybe you can come again for our next seasons, upcoming seasons. So thank you so much for the viewers for watching tonight's episode. Don't forget to follow, like, comment, subscribe our social media accounts, which are YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and our latest account on LinkedIn. This has been Political Insights, 40 minutes of political knowledge, and I'm Alia Daniel.